Measures to share to prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries. We remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. Thank you for your cooperation. So this afternoon we have Marc Miller, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, and the Honourable Randy Boissonnault, the Minister of Employment, and they are here to make an announcement about strengthening our temporary resident programs and migration pathways. I'll leave it to you guys. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thanks, Jean-Paul. Thanks, everyone, for being with us today. Merci tout le monde de votre attention. J'aimerais juste commencer en nous situant au tout début de la pandémie. On avait proposé des changements, des mesures temporaires pour protéger les travailleurs, inspirer de la confiance et stimuler la croissance dans un contexte de stagnation économique et d'incertitude internationale. And so what we did is we accelerated hiring, we created jobs, we supported Canada's small businesses, and it also meant that we brought in more temporary foreign workers. And we welcomed those temporary foreign workers to fill hundreds of thousands of job vacancies. Coming out of the pandemic, we had 1 million job vacancies, and the entire ecosystem was asking us to bring in more workers so we could jumpstart the economy. We did that. Now we're closer to 500,000 job vacancies, and you have heard the Prime Minister, you've heard me on this matter, and now Canada's fully recovered from the pandemic. We have the strongest economy in the G7. Foreign direct investment per capita is tops in the world. And so what we're doing today is making sure that the measures that we introduced stick and that we actually reflect today's economic realities. So, j'ai été très clair. Le programme de travailleurs étrangers temporaires a toujours été et sera toujours utilisé comme un dernier recours, une mesure de dernier recours pour combler les postes vacants. Il ne s'agit pas d'un outil pour les travailleurs de remplacer les employeurs de remplacer les travailleurs canadiens ou supprimer leur salaire. So, in English, let me state that I've always been clear that the temporary foreign worker program is and has always been a last resort measure and should never be used to replace Canadian workers who want the jobs, and it should not be used to suppress their wages. And so last month, the PM was clear and announced changes to the temporary foreign worker program, and those changes will come into effect September 26th. And I want to just review them because it's going to be important for the substance of my comments today. So these changes included reducing the cap from 20% to 10%, and in census metropolitan areas where the unemployment is higher than 6%, there's a refusal to process in the low-wage stream. I've also undertaken over the next now 60 days to come back to you all with our plans on the high-wage stream. Donc, pour préciser en français, le Premier ministre a indiqué en août, et les changements vont prendre effet le 26 septembre, que le pourcentage des effectifs qu'une entreprise peut avoir de travailleurs étrangers temporaires a diminué de 20% à 10%. Et dans les régions de recensement métropolitaine où le taux de chômage est plus que 6%, moi, je vais mettre en place, on va avoir en place un refus de traitement de ces demandes. Je confirme aujourd'hui que ce changement s'appliquera également au Québec, au programme de traitement simplifié, qui n'a actuellement pas de plafond. Today, I'm confirming that this change will also be applicable to the traitement simplifié in Quebec, which currently does not have a cap limit. Nous avons également annoncé une réduction de la durée maximale de nouveaux permis de travail pour la catégorie de bas salaire qui passerait de 2 années à 1 an. Cette mesure exclura les employeurs du secteur agricole primaire et inclura les permis de travail relevant au traitement simplifié au Québec. Enfin, je confirme également que la liste des régions métropolitaines de recensement soumises au processus de refus sera mise à jour tous les trimestres à l'aide des données les plus récentes sur le marché du travail afin de garantir qu'elles répondent aux besoins du Canada et qu'elles tiennent compte des taux de chômage régionaux. As I've said before, and I'm going to state it again, the temporary foreign worker program is an accordion. It's meant to flex with the economy. When we have a high number of vacancies, we can bring in more people, and as the economy tightens, we close the accordion and we make it harder for people to come in because Marc and I and our government want those jobs to go to Canadians. We want them to go to people who live here. We want them to go to students. We want them to go to newcomers. We want them to go to people who want to take those jobs, point à la ligne. And so we're working hard every day to make sure there's more jobs for Canadians. We're seeing a slight increase in unemployment, which is a natural result of the high interest rates, which are also coming down. And now with inflation at 2% and having come down over 8 months, that's a critical piece to see a turn in the economy. And today we're making good on our promise to actually reduce the numbers in the temporary foreign worker program and to make sure that the program applies across the country. Merci beaucoup, and I'll turn now to my colleague Marc Miller.
Thanks, Randy. Et bonjour à tous. Merci, Randy, d'avoir mis la table pour tout le monde. Less than a year ago, we announced 3 big measures when it comes to international students. 1, a national cap and a redistribution of the student permits out of a spirit of fairness across the provinces and territories. 2, a very important limitation on spousal permits. And 3, as part of making sure that the system is dealing with the fraud that we had seen, a process of letter of acceptances that involves the provinces certifying that the institutions that international students are coming into are indeed those that we see on the applications. Those were very important, in addition to some of the measures that I announced in December with respect to the solvency requirements of students that have to come to Canada. Canada is not an inexpensive place to live in. And in addition to the work hour amendments that we have made that limit the work hours to 20 and now coming up 24 hours for students studying full time. We expect students to be doing exactly that. But let's set the table further a little. When you look at the growth that we have seen in people that are temporary residents of Canada, that's something that has grown almost exponentially over the last few years, from about 437,000 individuals in 2019 alone to about 1.2 million in 2023. That comes with consequences, but let's not also forget the importance that immigration generally, the importance of people that are here on a temporary basis has done for the economy. The Bank of Canada has said it, the International Monetary Fund has said it, the immigration writ large has been in part responsible for preventing us from going into a recession, has been important for the net growth in the gross domestic product. Again, this has been important, and it's been important to the growth of the country, but I think it's safe to admit that we have allowed certain aspects of this to get overheated, and probably for too long. I made in March an announcement, an important one, to reduce the number of people that are here temporarily from 7% to 5% over the next 3 years. The Bank of Canada rightly highlighted that a number of the measures that we have taken, while important, were not sufficient in order to address that number and to give people the satisfaction that those numbers were going to come down in that period. Today, along with the announcements that Randy is making, we are announcing further measures, specifically, importantly, with respect to international students, and a few other ones that I will go through here shortly. First, I'd like to say that the measures that we've taken with respect to international students, and again, taking a step back, international students and the postgraduate work permits that come with it, occupy about 50% of the temporary workers that are here in Canada. The programs that Randy administers about 10-15%, depending how you're counting. So the growth in the international student space, along with the postgraduate work permits that come with them, the spousal permits that come with them, are ones where we owe it to Canadians, and in the context of an economy where the labour market in some areas is constricting, we need to adjust accordingly. I would say that the measures that we've taken up to now are working. You have seen more than anecdotal evidence that there has been an impact on certain rental markets where students are more prevalent. And this is an announcement in advance of the annual level plan that I know a number of you are eager to hear me on, that I will be announcing on November 1st. And integrating for the first time ever a fuller picture of what immigration looks like in our country and what we are projecting for the economy, for Canada, for our social cohesion for the next 3 years. So today I am announcing 6 additional measures, and I'll go through them in a little bit of detail because I think that's important. Tout d'abord, nous allons réduire la cible des permis d'études délivrés de 10% en 2025 par rapport à 2024 et nous maintiendrons ce niveau pour 2026. Cela signifie que nous visons à délivrer jusqu'à 437 000 permis d'études en 2025 et 2026, ce qui représenterait une baisse d'environ 36 par rapport à 2023. Deuxièmement, nous allons exempter moins d'étudiants du plafond. Ça veut dire que les gens qui n'étaient pas partis du plafond qu'on avait annoncé en janvier, c'est-à-dire les gens qui étudient à la maîtrise ou au doctorat, vont être pris en ligne de compte dans ce calcul. For those of you that are looking at the numbers, you will see the number I announced is higher as part of the first measure I'm taking, and that's because of measure 2, in which we are carving in master's and PhD programs. So simply put, the international student cap is here to stay. Certains étudiants étrangers sont mieux préparés pour s'intégrer et évidemment réussir au Canada, en particulier les étudiants qui sont titulaires de diplômes d'études supérieures. Ceci répond bien aux besoins du marché du travail canadien. C'est pourquoi nous réservons environ 12 du plafond à ces étudiants et alignerons le programme de permis de travail de post-diplôme sur nos priorités économiques. Over the next 3 years, and I think this is important, we expect these changes to yield approximately 300,000 fewer study permits. À partir ça c'est la troisième mesure, à partir du 1er novembre, nous instaurerons de nouvelles exigences en matière de capacité de compétences linguistiques pour les demandeurs de permis de travail post-diplôme alignés sur les exigences du volet de résidence permanente. A Canadian language benchmark, CLB, level 7 for university graduates and CLB 5 for college graduates will be required for anyone applying for post-graduation work permit on or after November 1st of 2024. We know that people that can speak the language are better equipped to succeed in Canadian society. This is a more stringent requirement that I think is very important if we are going to continue the successful story of integration of some of these people into Canadian society. Fourth, for prospective students applying on or after November 1st, post-graduation work permit eligibility will depend on the level of study. Graduates from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs will remain eligible for a work permit up to 3 years. These graduates are more likely to acquire transferable knowledge and skills and be able to adapt to changing economic circumstances over the long term. Les diplômés des programmes des collèges publics, par contre, pourront obtenir un permis de travail pour une durée maximale de 3 ans seulement si leur domaine d'études est lié à des pénuries sur le marché du travail au Canada. Ces changements feront en sorte que les diplômés disposent de compétences et des occasions de travail nécessaires pour s'intégrer avec succès dans le marché du travail canadien et éventuellement faire la transition peut-être vers la résidence permanente. Over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 175,000 fewer postgraduate work permits. In the near future, we'll also take further measures to restrict eligibility to spousal open work permits. The fifth measure that I'm announcing today will be to further limit work permit eligibility to spouses of students in doctoral and certain master's select professional programs and certain pilot programs. And over the next 3 years, we expect that measure and these changes to yield approximately 50,000 fewer work permits for the spouses of students groups. And sixth, unrelated to students and postgraduate work permits, we'll also be limiting work permit eligibility to include only spouses of highly skilled, specialized workers such as C-suite executives, scientists, engineers, lawyers, professors, and technicians, or of workers in sectors where there are those key labor shortages. Spouses of workers in critical sectors like healthcare, construction will also obviously continue to be eligible for those work permits. As a quantitative measure, again, over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 100,000 fewer work permits. Again, I do stress that these are estimates and obviously will need to be tracked closely. Finalement, en conclusion, comme vous le savez, au cours des dernières années, le contexte en immigration a changé. Évidemment, il y a beaucoup de gens qui tentent et qui menacent d'exploiter, qui exploitent nos programmes d'immigration. À cette fin, j'ai demandé, il y a plusieurs mois, à mon sous-ministre d'examiner la façon dont les gens, les visas, qui donnent des visas, prennent des décisions dans ce nouveau contexte, y compris les outils, la formation, l'analyse et les procédures utilisées pour approuver les visas de résidents temporaires. En juin de cette année, après avoir discuté avec mes collègues des provinces, après nos discussions internes, j'ai demandé à mon département de scruter à la loupe cette prise de décision face au volume qui n'est pas soutenable de gens qui désirent venir au Canada. Sachez que arriver au Canada, vouloir venir au Canada est peut-être un rêve, mais c'est un privilège et non un droit. Those measures that we have taken internally to be a little more restrictive on who gets visas, looking at countries where we are seeing people exploiting the visa system, that is to say that those that are claiming for asylum are not legitimate asylum claimants, is a challenge to the system, particularly given the volume of people that are looking to come to Canada. Again, as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right. If you compare the numbers of people that have come in, for example, in one country where we have had some of those challenges from India, we have seen those visas jump down from around 50,000 in January to less than 10,000 in August. Again, these are preliminary numbers, but it is an indicative sign that the measures that we have taken over the summer, after discussions with my provincial colleagues, are working. There's more work to do. And again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system. And it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border. I want to say one final word on what I believe to be, at least at the initial stages, a productive working group with a number of my colleague ministers of labour and immigration, skills training, depending on the title they hold in the province that they represent over the course of the summer. At the Council of the Federation, all of the premiers got together and said that we needed to work as a group to deal with the asylum challenge that this country is facing and that a lot of countries in our position are facing, particularly with respect to the unsustainable numbers of asylum seekers coming into Quebec and coming into Ontario. All premiers at that time agreed. We, as a parallel process, had already started the idea of a working group with my colleagues from the provinces to deal with this. We asked ourselves a fundamental question as part of our working group was, what does a fair asylum system look like? That started first and foremost with the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that we are doing our role when it comes to bringing and addressing the number of asylum seekers coming into the country, but also the roles of the provinces that have the effective jurisdiction on some of the services that these asylum seekers seek to do their part. And they all agreed to do so. And with the chairmanship of the Government of Canada and the Government of Nova Scotia, we worked throughout the summer to look at different models of what could this system look like. I'm taking a little bit of time to give you some background because I currently no longer think that working group is actually helpful. I don't blame the bureaucrats in question. I don't blame the civil servants of our respective provinces and territories for having done their work. I don't blame my colleague ministers for putting their hearts into it. There was a lot of good faith at that table. But sadly, 3 particularly conservative ministers have stood up, the premiers of Nova Scotia, of New Brunswick and Alberta, and decided to weaponize this working group. They took a theoretical number of asylum seekers based on the last year's number of asylum seekers, divided it up by the population as they would, and assumed that the federal government would impose a number of asylum seekers on them. Let me restate, Ontario and Quebec are doing more than their fair share, and the other provinces need to step up. But there was no point in time where anyone said that the federal government was going to impose thousands of asylum seekers on unprepared provinces. I should probably give you the documents that they themselves leaked because it would probably be quite helpful for your analysis. But this was a productive working group that has been weaponized by 3 premiers in particular for their re-election or their leadership review, and I think it's really irresponsible. Those provinces come knocking at my door for more immigrants. They are responsible for about 20% of permanent residency numbers through the provincial nominee program. Quebec has the entire control over its permanent residency program based on the Quebec-Canada Accord. And there is a responsible way of doing things. This was not responsible, and they threw their own ministers under the bus, and they've made this productive working group much less productive. It doesn't mean we're giving up. I question the pertinence of this group, given the fact that the documents have been leaked. It's unfortunate, but I do think there was good faith around the table, and we can work on an individual basis with these provinces to see which ones will stand up. There's money on the table. There's over $1 billion that we've committed to making sure that we have a system that makes sense. There are countries in Europe that have a system that makes sense. And indeed, the European Union has a system that, while they are facing different challenges than us, at least has some semblance of sense. So this is about a bunch of premiers who decided to weaponize the issue. Unfortunately, it's undermined the credibility of this committee, and obviously considering dissolving it. That's the last of the formal part of my presentation, but Randy and I are pleased to take your questions, which I'm sure you have a few of.
Thank you, ministers. Yeah, we'll turn to the question and answer portion of our event today. We'll do one question, one follow-up, and we'll start with Najoud Al-Maliz at the Canadian Press, please.
Hi, Minister. I'm hoping you can clarify a little bit about whether you're still intending to decrease international student enrollments by a third, because I believe that was the initial announcement, and the math is a little bit hard to follow in this current announcement as it relates to the previous one.
Yeah, Manjut, that pertinent question. What we did is we established a cap, and we said, provinces, you deal with it the way you want to deal with. And we've been asking provinces, indeed begging provinces, to actually put a little rigor into their international student system, failing which we've decided to step up and do it. This is a cap, so provinces can go under, like Quebec and Alberta, or they can consistently struggle with being over it. And I think that is where we kind of come in and play our role. We established a cap in January because of the recruiting impact that this cap has had. We are seeing a lot of institutions coming under that cap. Now, they will adjust their behavior. This is a turbulent year for post-secondary institutions. I certainly acknowledge that. The turbulence is something I think we need to deal with, and what they want is predictability. So what we're saying is the cap that we established, whether it's achieved or not in an aggregate level by every province put together, I don't control that, but that cap is getting reduced another 10%. We assume behavior will adjust. I've told post-secondary institutions several times that they need to adjust their recruitment practices. I have told them that the cost of acquisition of international students is certain to increase. So if they adjust their practices, get quality students, make sure those students have the means to stay in here, that's fine. But when it comes to the numerical amount of students that come into this province, come into this country, we have fixed that cap at what it was in January, folded in master's and PhD students, taken that number and reduced it by 10% for the 2025 and 2026 years. So whether those numbers pan out is not exactly within my control. All we control is the upward limit that it doesn't seem like people are pushing against at this point.
And follow up on a different subject. If either of you have seen the video of Jagmeet Singh from yesterday, with that altercation outside of West Block, I'd be interested in your thoughts on it.
People on Parliament Hill and in our legislatures are called to serve. Regardless of your political stripes, you're here. People on this hill are here to serve Canadians. And we don't agree always on the policies or the approaches they take, but everybody should have the ability to come to work and walk around Parliament Hill free from harassment. And what happened the other day was not fair to Mr. Singh. And quite frankly, I think he handled it well. But we have to do more work to make sure that people in Parliament Hill, including our staffers, are protected. I have shared with the press gallery before that I have experienced this kind of harassment at my home. I've experienced it at my own barbecue earlier. It's not pleasant, and it's something that we're all having to get used to. But to not have a secure parliamentary precinct that needs to be fixed. And I think Mr. Singh was right to defend himself.
Much the same way. I mean, I think he has like a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and stuff. Like, so he shouldn't have to get a purple belt in jiu-jitsu to feel safe. And a lot of us are threatened. It's gotten worse over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And as much as I was proud of Jagmeet standing up to this guy, it shouldn't have gone to that. There's a bunch of knuckleheads walking around the hill with their own agenda. I think the sad part in this is that Pierre Poilievre continues to play footsies with these guys. His own members of parliament are out laughing it up and drinking with these guys. And that's it's not this isn't an insinuation. This is fact. Canadians need to see that in a clear fashion and see where it's coming from. I think guys like Pierre Poilievre need to repudiate this disgusting behavior by people that support him.
Like, why is the MP for St. Albert Edmonton, Michael Cooper, out there having cocktails with these guys? Like, these people have been arrested before, they've been charged before, they're harassing people who are just trying to do their work. That behavior is not acceptable. He should answer to his constituents for that.
Okay. Pamela Almeida Sumeo from Market News International, please.
Hello. Hi, Minister Miller. So the Bank of Canada a few weeks ago suggested that the government will not meet its targets for pulling back on immigration and slowing population growth. Are you seeing signs that the government is having difficulty meeting its objectives?
I think that, well, the measures, and they were right to say that at the time, because we had told them that our measures they were just reflecting what we'd already told them. So the measures that we announced, that Randy and I have announced over the course of the last 3 months, were not sufficient to meet what we had announced as a reduction of temporary residents from 7% to 5%. These measures today, according to our statistics, and we'll have to monitor them closely, will meet those targets. The Bank of Canada is independent. It can analyze it itself. And these are the announcements that they've been looking for. They clearly said in their release that they were looking for the further announcements that we've been working for over the summer. So the suite of measures and the projections that my department has put together are expected to meet those projections. And if we do things right, perhaps even exceed them. But again, we have to be very careful how we're adjusting these things, because it can have an impact on the economy, and we don't want to overcorrect, because that has effects as well.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, Canada's internal birth rate is at record lows. If we're slowing down immigration, is there a plan to find other ways to keep the population stable in the long run?
I mean, asking me to tell people to have babies, that's way out of my comfort zone. But I think the reality is we all face, as countries in our position, challenges with birth rates. That is part of the reason why we need immigration, and we are facing sort of generational challenges as opposed to electoral challenges. When as the Minister of Immigration, that is sometimes the top issue in my head. Even were we to have a baby boom today, it would take 20 some years to make these young babies productive members of the economy, which is probably the last way you look at them when you have birth. It's a beautiful event, but that's reality. So we would still need immigrants regardless, even if we had a massive baby boom for the next 20 years. We will need that. I think as I announce the levels plan in the 1st of November, that is a question that we need to address. The measures that we take are ones that are very important. This is a country built on immigration, but it's also one that needs to take into account a number of factors that Canadians have told us to take into account. I did a strategic review in my department over a year ago. These are things that came up repeatedly, and they're increasingly coming up in the public discourse. So the reality is that you have a particular view on immigration. We do have a responsibility to get it right, getting the number right, make sure that our measures are not recessionary in nature, and make sure that we are addressing these generational issues, which is the low birth rate. I think some of the measures that the government has taken with respect to childcare, getting more women into the economy, being able to have someone take care of their kids, the child family benefit, are sources of that ability to be able to create and foster an environment where it is affordable to raise children. But again, right now, look, I got 3 of them, and I get a good paycheck. It is a challenge for people with children. We just need to make it more favorable, because we can't get out of this without immigration, and we can't have a birth rate that we see other countries going down as well with low immigration. You have countries like South Korea that are facing a wall and some existential issues. If they don't address things in the next few years, would not like to wind up in that position.
To put some numbers to what Marc's just said, as the guy that looks at the labor data and the economic growth data, 99% of economic growth in Canada is reliant on newcomers to keep coming to this country, full stop. And so the core of the levels plan is critical, and Marc and it's a delicate balancing act to get it right with the comprehensive approach that he's mapped out. But there's something else. By 2032, our entire growth as a country, population growth, will be based on newcomers coming to this country. And this is also against a backdrop. I'll go into a sector of the economy right now. 400,000 skilled trades workers will retire by 2032. It's the great tsunami. It's just happening. Demographics is destiny. The other piece, though, is that with all the building that we're doing, the things that we want to achieve, we've got another demand of about 300,000 more skilled trades workers. So you can see that we have a challenge of making sure we have enough people with the right skills to get the right training to fit into the jobs that are needed so that we can grow the country. And that's why Marc and I and our departments are working so closely together, and we have broken down silos between our ministries so that immigration and labor market needs are very closely tied together.
Okay, Marie Vestel, Le Devoir.
Bonjour à vous deux, Monsieur Miller. Ma question était plus pour vous. Vous en avez parlé au début de ce working group sur les demandeurs d'asile.